Pilot absence could be causing flight cancellations for Cathay Pacific. Activist seeks political asylum in the UK after serving jail sentence. Special traffic arrangements for New Year's Eve. Hello and welcome to TVB News. The situation involving the recent string of Cathay Pacific flight cancellations continues to deteriorate. At least 21 flights were canceled today, making up around 8% of all flights, with an additional 13 flights canceled for tomorrow. The city's flagship carrier said the recent flight cuts were due to a higher than expected number of pilots getting sick. But unions pointed to manpower shortage as the primary cause. Timothy Lee has our top story.
The festive mood was dampened for some travelers in the festive holidays, as a string of cancelled Cathay Pacific flights ruined travel plans for many. More than 10 Cathay flights have been cancelled in the 4 consecutive days beginning on Christmas Eve. The number of daily cancelled flights only seems to be on the rise. At least 21 flights, including arrivals and departures from the city, were cancelled today. Long-haul flights between Hong Kong and destinations like Australia and Europe were not spared. This Taiwanese tourist said he only found out about the cancellation after he arrived at the airport, and that the airline did not provide him with an alternative.
It's his birthday, January 1. They're telling us to go home on the 1st. Isn't that stupid? We paid full fare business class.
Cathay has apologized for the incidents, citing the flu season has led to many pilots becoming sick in recent days, which led to their decision to cancel certain flights. The total number of cancelled flights this month comprised less than 1% of flights, but a pilots union representative said he believes the cancellations are unrelated to the flu season.
This is what happens when you don't have enough pilots. There's always going to be some illness among crew, but this doesn't mean that flights have to be cancelled.
Cathay Pacific currently employs around 2,500 pilots. That's only around 50% of the pre-pandemic figure. This as the airline resumed 70% of its pre-pandemic capacity. Currently, pilots are stipulated by law not to fly over 100 hours within 28 days, and no more than 900 hours within 12 months. Sources said many pilots were close to reaching the 100-hour monthly limit.
Nearly 1,000 pilots redundant around the world and in Hong Kong. But for them to come back, there has to be an interesting offer. Their pilots have choices around the world.
Sources said pilots leaving Cathay Pacific have slowed down in the first time in 4 months after the carrier announced a year-end bonus. Timothy Lee, TVB News.
A former student activist has fled the city for the UK to seek political asylum after completing his jail term earlier this year. Tony Chung was supposed to be under a post-release supervision order. The Correctional Services Department said it will cooperate with other law enforcement agencies to, quote, hunt him down. Jackie Lin reports.
Tony Chung Han Lam revealed his arrival in the UK on his social media account and is applying for political asylum there. Chung is a former convener of disbanded activist group Student Localism. He was the youngest person to be jailed under the national security law, having been put behind bars for 4 months in 2020 over flag desecration and having taken part in an unlawful protest. He served a further 43 months for secession and money laundering. On June 5th, Chung was released after completing the jail term. Chung was under 21 years old when the sentences were handed down, so he had to follow a 1-year supervision order on release. He said he found a summer job this year, but was asked to quit by the Correctional Services Department, as he is not allowed to be hired by specific businesses. He was then asked to sign a revised version of the Supervision Services Order. New terms included the prohibition on publishing any content related to his convicted offenses or considered as endangering national security. He was also barred from public speaking. Starting June, national security officers had requested meetings every 2 to 4 weeks with him. He said the officers proposed to provide informant fees, asking him to supply information about others as proof of his change and willingness to cooperate. On the grounds of emotional adjustment, Chung convinced the Correctional Services Department to let him travel to Okinawa, Japan during Christmas, but he has now fled to the UK and applied for political asylum. The Correctional Services Department strongly condemned Chung's act. And when asked about the ban on him speaking publicly, Deputy Commissioner Kenneth Leung said it's to prevent Chung from committing the same offence.
There's no such things about violating the freedom of speech. You must know that for Chung's case, he's violated the national security law for publishing. That's why we have to remind him, and we have to let him do not do it again.
Jackie Lin, TVB News.
The parents of activist Agnes Chow, who had fled to Canada, were reportedly invited to assist with police investigations. They left the Tai Po police station shortly after noon today. It's understood Chow's mother was the guarantor when applying to release her daughter on bail. Sources say investigations are on whether Chow's mother has the latest information about Chow and whether she offered support to the plan. Chow was arrested in 2020 for having allegedly colluded with foreign forces to endanger national security. She had to report to the police as part of her bail conditions. After Chow failed to report to the police by Thursday's deadline, police issued a strong condemnation. It said that jumping bail is a shameful act and endangering national security is a serious criminal offense. The department also warned that unless the fugitive turns herself in, she will be hunted by the police for the rest of her life. It is 2 days until New Year's Eve. Several areas will be cordoned off with police implementing traffic measures as the city celebrates the end of 2023. Revelers will enjoy their first New Year's Eve since the return to post-COVID normalcy. Areas such as Victoria Harbour will organize countdowns and fireworks. Some roads will be cordoned off on December 31st. The measures will be more extensive than those of Christmas Eve. Starting at 6 p.m., parts of Chim Sha Tsui, East Chim Sha Tsui, and the West Kowloon Cultural District will be pedestrianized and closed off to traffic. On Hong Kong Island, Lang Kwai Fong and Central will be cordoned off from 2:30 p.m. Police will adjust the size of that area depending on the number of people. Central Ferry Piers and Bauhinia Square will be closed throughout the day. The measure also applies to parts of Hing Fat Street in Causeway Bay. The government launched a mental health support hotline on Wednesday. Organizers of the service noted they have already received more than 1,000 calls as of this afternoon, with 21 cases requiring follow-ups. But there is criticism that the hotline operators are lacking in skill and urged for more government training. Timothy Lee tells us more.
The 24-hour government hotline is 18111 and provides callers with live conversation service. The service provider said as of Friday afternoon, it has received more than 1,000 calls. Most callers spoke about suffering from physical health conditions, while others mentioned mental health issues, troubled relationships with family members, as well as work-related stress. Most of these cases are not listed as emergencies. But 21 cases considered were referred to the Social Welfare Department, Hospital Authority, or non-governmental organizations, among which 4 cases were listed as high risk. Dr. Feng Cheng Tim, director of Richmond Fellowship of Hong Kong, said many people are in need of emotional and mental support. Currently, the average time per call lasts less than 10 minutes, while the call time for those needing emotional support could last up to 30 minutes. Yun Shuk Yan from the Society for Community Organization, or SOCO, said she received reports of residents requiring emotional support, saying the hotline operators made them uncomfortable, including asking callers whether they have tried hurting themselves or had thoughts of injuring others. She stressed operators should be more caring towards callers and only ask sensitive questions near the end of the conversation. Yoon suggested authorities to provide more training to hotline operators and social workers to strengthen their communication skills. Timothy Lee, TVB News.
Overseas, the United Nations believes as many as 150,000 people have been pushed to Gaza's southern areas as Israel's military assault against Hamas continues. Israel's admitted mistakes have killed civilians in refugee camps in central Gaza. But the government and a former hostage have defended the war. David Garrett reports.
A baby is rushed for medical attention, caught up in the Israel-Hamas war. Medics go to work. The child is bruised and bleeding, stemming from an Israeli strike. The baby did not have far to come. The blast happened within a few hundred meters of the hospital. More wounded pile into the hospital near the border with Egypt. Israel say in order to target Hamas, they have to strike urban civilian areas. Gaza's health ministry say more than 21,000 have died in the conflict. At least 20 were killed in this onslaught in Rafah. While doctors at the Kuwaiti hospital called for the genocide to stop, these Palestinian women are relieved to find each other. One says, "We escaped the north to my sister's house in Rafah. They hit the neighbour's house and it fell toward us." More died in central Gaza as camps came under attack. Israeli warplanes pounded built-up areas in Maghazi and Nuzarat, levelling buildings, residents said. The nearby Al-Aqsa hospital recorded 25 dead bodies. An Israeli government representative was asked about attacks on refugees, in particular one at Maghazi on Christmas Eve, which killed 86.
This was a regrettable mistake. This should not have happened. The choice of munition was incorrect. We regret any loss of life because we are trying to do everything we can to minimize civilian casualties, while Hamas has a strategy of maximizing casualties, and we continue to learn lessons and step up our efforts to get civilians out of harm's way.
There is dissent and frustration in Israel with their government's approach. These young people rallied in Jerusalem to ask why over 100 hostages have not been rescued. Benjamin Netanyahu's approval rating has slumped to around 35%.
We came here from Tel Aviv to the Knesset. We want to support and bring back all the kids, women, men, and teenagers. We want to bring them back to Israel and to their homes. We're here to put pressure on our Knesset, and we want them back.
Turkey's new unmanned fighter jet has flown for the first time. The Anka 3 looked every bit the futuristic fighting machine, taking to the skies over Ankara. It flew at 8,000 feet at a speed of over 250 kilometers an hour. That is a fraction of its capability, Turkey says. The government said it will make a strong contribution to their defense. The storm hitting the UK caused confusion when firefighters were called to an iconic seaside tower, only to find the blaze was in fact fabric that had been blown into the structure. Blackpool in Lancashire is a traditional summer location in the United Kingdom, and its tower is well known. Footage shows what looks like a small fire halfway up the tower. Emergency services were called out after several social media posts. Even a helicopter was deployed as the town worried their centerpiece would be wrecked. It turned out to be orange fabric blown there by Storm Garrett. Garrett caused further disruption as a mini tornado blew the roof off a house in Stalybridge near Manchester. The family, including 3 children, admitted they were lucky to escape. 80-mile-an-hour winds have battered parts of the UK, causing damage and disruption to New Year travel plans. Still ahead, Russia and Iran plan to trade in local currencies instead of the U.S. dollar. U.S. state of Maine disqualifies Donald Trump from upcoming presidential election. Another presidential hopeful, Nikki Haley, is in hot water over issue concerning slavery. Welcome back to TVB News. Iran and Russia have finalized an agreement to trade in their local currencies instead of the U.S. dollar, according to Iranian state media. The report said Iran's central bank chief, who headed a technical delegation, arrived in Moscow on Tuesday for talks on expanding monetary and banking cooperation and improving ties with Russia. On Wednesday, the Iranian bank chief met with his Russian counterpart and finalized an agreement to use their national currencies, the Iranian rial and the Russian ruble, in bilateral trade instead of the U.S. dollar. Iran and Russia, both under U.S. sanctions, have recently strengthened their political and economic ties to counter U.S. pressure. China and Russia reportedly reached consensus over bilateral inspection protocols on the import of Russian pork. Russian pork could start exporting to China from February next year. China had banned the import of Russian pork since 2008, owing to the African swine fever outbreaks there. The 15-year ban was lifted in September as the latest step to facilitate Russian pork imports into China. Authorities from both sides signed off on the draft protocol on inspection, quarantine, and veterinary health requirements for Russian pork imports to China. Russia's pig breeding industry expects the export volume of pork could reach 150 to 200,000 tons annually as a result of the deal. In the U.S., Maine's Democratic Secretary of State, Shenna Bellows, has removed former President Donald Trump from the state's presidential primary ballot under the Constitution's insurrection clause. Daniel Rao reports.
Maine Secretary of State Shenna Bellows made the ruling after some state residents, including a bipartisan group of former lawmakers, challenged former U.S. President Donald Trump's position on the ballot. Bellows found that Trump could no longer run for his prior job because his role in the January 6, 2021 attack on the U.S. Capitol violated Section 3, which bans from office those who engaged in insurrection. The clause was added in 1868 to keep defeated Confederates from returning to their former positions of power in local and federal government after the U.S. Civil War. It prohibits anyone who broke an oath to support the Constitution from holding office. The decision follows a ruling earlier this month by the Colorado Supreme Court that removed Trump from the ballot there under Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. That decision has been stayed until the U.S. Supreme Court decides whether Trump is barred by the Civil War-era provision, which prohibits those who engaged in insurrection from holding office. The Trump campaign said it would appeal Bellows' decision to Maine state courts. Bellows suspended her ruling until that court system rules on the case. In the end, it is likely that America's highest court will have the final say on whether Trump appears on the ballot in Maine and in the other states. The timing of the U.S. Supreme Court's decision is unclear. Petitioners have been calling for a ruling to be made before March 5th, known as Super Tuesday, when 16 states, including Colorado and Maine, are scheduled to vote in the Republican presidential nominating process. Dan Orell, TVB News.
Meanwhile, Republican presidential contender Nikki Haley is embroiled in controversy. In a town hall event on Wednesday, she did not say slavery was one of the main causes of the U.S. Civil War, an omission she corrected later. More from NBC News.
Tonight, Republican presidential candidate Nikki Haley in cleanup mode after leaving out slavery as a root cause of the Civil War during a town hall in New Hampshire on Wednesday.
What do you want me to say about slavery?
No, you've answered my question. Thank you.
Next question.
Haley spent Thursday attempting to explain what she meant.
Of course the Civil War was about slavery.
And make clear the role slavery played in American history.
We know the Civil War was about slavery, but it was also more than that. It was about the freedoms of every individual.
Her opponents seized on the comments. President Joe Biden responding, quote, "It was about slavery." And GOP rival Ron DeSantis arguing she isn't ready for the big stage.
The minute that she faces any type of scrutiny, she tends to cave.
As governor of South Carolina, Haley pushed for the removal of a Confederate flag on display on the Capitol grounds after a mass shooting at a black church in Charleston, carried out by a white supremacist.
It's time to move the flag from the Capitol grounds.
She made that decision after intense pressure by African-American leaders in the wake of the massacre. The firestorm comes as Haley is gaining ground on the clear frontrunner, former President Donald Trump. Trump has routinely used divisive rhetoric and recently made racist comments about migrants and minority groups.
They're poisoning the blood of our country. That's what they've done.
But Trump's controversial words have done little to change the trajectory of the race.
Back locally, 2 men were arrested on suspicion of posing as police officers to commit robberies. Police received the reports on December 6th and 23rd from 2 women. The 2 men were said to have broken into their hotel rooms and took away a total of $63,000. The 2 suspects, aged 31 and 52, were arrested in Mongkok and Ma On Shan on Wednesday and Thursday, respectively, on charges of theft and impersonation of law enforcement officers. One claimed to be a transport worker, while the other suspect is unemployed. That's the news. Thanks for watching. Enjoy the final weekend of 2023. See you next year. Bye for now.